So about a week ago, I ended up making my top 7 worst drafting teams of the 2010s. So here we are today with my 10 best NBA drafting teams of the last decade. So yeah, I came up with 10 teams this time because there were a lot more better draft picks than bad draft picks throughout these teams over the last 10 years. I will have a couple surprises in this list as well, and if they were a good team and they made late draft picks, I'm going to value that because obviously there's going to be good teams that weren't picking high in this draft, but they are going to make this list because they made their draft picks count. Either it's in the 20s, maybe it was early in the second round. Drop a like if you guys do enjoy these videos, and without further ado, let's get into this. So coming in as my 10th best drafting team of the last decade, it's the New York Knicks, and no, I am not kidding. Say what you want about the Knicks, and yes, they aren't a good team at signing free agents or trading, but they're actually a solid drafting team. So they started off the decade with no first-round picks, and their first pick of the decade was Andy Rodens, who did nothing in the NBA. But the pick later, they selected Landry Fields out of Stanford, and he was a really good second-round pick who ended up getting a pretty decent-sized contract from the Raptors after his time in the Knicks was done. They had their first-round pick of the decade in 2011, and at pick 17, they took Iman Shumpert, who was a future champion with the Cleveland Cavaliers in 2016. He turned out to be a pretty good 3-and-D player in the NBA, and getting him at pick 17 is really good value. So they didn't have a first round pick in 2012, and their second round pick never played for them. But in 2013, with the 24th overall pick, they took Tim Hardaway Jr. out of Michigan, who was a great player in the NBA for somebody that is picked 24th. You see all the big contract the Knicks gave him. Obviously not the greatest decision in the world, but he was actually playing pretty good for the Mavericks this year. 2014, they didn't have a first round pick. This is due to bad trades, but this isn't going to knock on their drafting skills. 2015, they made their best pick of the decade, selecting Kristaps Porzingis 4th overall. This was basically the only good move Phil Jackson made as a Knicks president. And you got to give them credit for this pick. 4th overall, a lot of people thought this was a giant reach for the Knicks, and this turned out to be a lot better of the pick of the player that went before them in Jahlil Okafor, who was a similar position. So Kristaps was their best pick of the decade. 2017, they took Frank Ntilikina 8th overall. Not a great pick there, not going to lie. But in the second round, they took Damian Dotson with the 44th pick. Solid pick there for a second round player. 2018, their top 10 pick, Kevin Knox, really didn't turn out all that well so far in his career. He was okay as a rookie, but really wasn't good as a sophomore this year. But with the 36th overall pick, they took Mitchell Robinson, who's been a great second round pick so far. And they also got Alonzo Trier as an undrafted free agent from that class. And we really don't know much of RJ Barrett yet from the 2019 class. But overall, the Knicks had a pretty solid drafting decade, and they are going to come in at number 10 on this list. And I know that was kind of a surprise, and this one is also going to be a surprise. Coming in at number 9, I'm going to have the Philadelphia 76ers. And you might be like, Matt, you just had them on the worst drafting teams of the decade. Yes, I have them on both lists because I think they made some great draft picks throughout this decade, and I think they made some really bad draft picks throughout this decade. But in this video, we are going to highlight the better picks that they made. In 2011, they ended up taking Nikola Vucevic 16th overall. Yeah, he didn't do a lot for Philly, but it was still a great player, a future all-star down the line, and that is amazing value with the 16th pick. In 2013, they took Michael Carter-Williams with the 11th pick in a relatively weak draft class, and he was the rookie of the year, so you got to give them a little bit credit for that. 2014 was a big draft for them, though. They took Joel Embiid, 3rd overall. They stuck with him. They were patient. He didn't play 2 years for them to start off his career, and now he's arguably the best center in basketball. They also got Dario Saric later in that draft, where they ended up trading Elfrid Payton to Orlando, and they got Saric and a future first. Great job by them. And then with the 39th pick in that draft, they got Jeremy Grant, who was a very important piece for the Nuggets this year. He cost the Nuggets a first-round pick to get him from OKC. Turned out to be a great second-round pick. In 2015, yeah, we know they took Jahlil Okafor, but at the 37th pick, they got Richaun Holmes, who was great for Sacramento this year, and they got him at pick 37. In 2016, they did pretty well in the first round. Ben Simmons at number 1. Obviously, number 1 overall pick. Hard to mess up. They took TLC at 24, who's an okay NBA player, but for pick 24, you know what? If you can get a rotational guy with the 24th pick, you got to be happy with that. And then at 26, they got Furkan Korkmaz, who's been an important player for them in this 2020 season. 2017, it wasn't great for them. Obviously, Markelle Fultz really didn't work out. They did get Jonah Bolden with the 36th pick. He's played a little bit for them, but nothing crazy. 2018, they ended up getting Zaire Smith, who wasn't good whatsoever, but getting Landry Shamet at 26 is great value there, so you got to give them credit for that pick. And then in 2019, getting Matisse Thybulle out of Washington was great for them in the 20s. So they made some really solid draft picks in this decade. Matisse Thybulle in 2019, Landry Shamet in 2018, Ben Simmons and Furkan Korkmaz in 2016, Rashawn Holmes in 2015, Joel Embiid, Dario Saric, Jeremy Grant in 2014. Michael Carter-Williams was okay for them, and they were able to flip him for solid value down the line in 2013, and then getting Nikola Vucevic in 2011 with the 16th pick. Coming in at the number 8 spot is a team that only made 3 first-round selections in the 2010s, and that is the Miami Heat. So the Miami Heat, obviously, they were really good to start off the decade with the Heatles, so they really didn't make a lot of high-profile draft picks in the draft, but they ended up hitting on their picks later in the decade that they needed to. To be honest, they didn't really do much up until 2015. They had a lot of second-round picks. None of them really panned out, but in 2015, they started off with a bang. They took Justice Winslow with the 10th overall pick, and if you kind of look at the picks around him, like Emmanuel Mudiay, Mario Hezonja, Frank Kaminsky, this was a solid pick. They got good value for Justice Winslow here at 10, and then at 40 in this draft, which was a great pick, they got Josh Richardson, who's one of the better shooting guards in the NBA, so that was tremendous value getting him at 40. They didn't have any picks in 2016, but in 2017, with the last pick of the lottery, they took Bam Adebayo, who was a 2020 All-Star and is emerging as one of the better centers in the NBA. And then in 2019, they ended up with Tyler Hero with the 13th pick, and also KZ Okpala later in the draft, who we haven't seen. But honestly, the picks that have mattered for them so far is basically 4 picks. Justice Winslow, Josh Richardson, Bam Adebayo, and Tyler Hero. They only had 3 first-round picks, obviously being Winslow, Adebayo, and Hero, and they all turned out pretty good. And then getting Josh Richardson with the 40th pick was great value. The Heat didn't make a lot of high-value draft picks in this decade, but the ones they made them count, and they're coming in at number 8 here. Coming in as the 7th best drafting team of the 2010s, it is going to be the San Antonio Spurs. So their 2010 first-round pick, James Anderson, really didn't do much in the NBA, but in 2011, they had a great draft. They ended up trading George Hill for the 15th pick, which ended up being Kawhi Leonard, and you know how his career turned out. And then with the 29th pick, they took Corey Joseph, which is great value for getting somebody at the 29th pick, a good backup point guard in the NBA. Because if you're getting somebody with 24 win shares, that's just amazing value at pick 29. They didn't do much in 2012, not having their first round pick and taking somebody 59th overall. Really didn't pan out. Yes, in 2013, their first round pick was a bust. Livio Jean-Charles never even played in the NBA whatsoever. But in 2014, with the 30th pick, coming off a finals victory over the Miami Heat, they took Kyle Anderson 30th overall. Now, he's not a great player for the Grizzlies. You might say he has a pretty bad contract, but his time in San Antonio was really solid for somebody drafted 30th overall. So you got to give R.C. Buford and the San Antonio Spurs front office credit for that pick. In 2015, though, I mentioned this as their worst pick of the decade. Nikola Milutinov, who didn't play whatsoever in the NBA. So that's 2 first-round picks for the Spurs that have not played in the decade. So you kind of have to take that into consideration in their rankings. But 2016 on, they did really solid. In 2016, with the 29th overall pick, they took DeJounte Murray out of Washington, who's been a great pick for somebody at 29. Maybe he's going to be a future All-Star one day. We'll see. And then a year later, with the 29th overall pick, they got Derek White, who has turned into a really good rotational guard for the Spurs and maybe even a starter for them in some scenarios. He was really good for them in that Nuggets series in the 2019 playoffs. Lonnie Walker with the 18th pick in 2018 has been all right. He's been nothing crazy, but he has not been a big disappointment yet. We'll see how his career turns out. And then we didn't really see much from Luka Šamanić or Keldon Johnson in 2019. So the Spurs were a team that was pretty much good for the whole decade, so they didn't have any top 15 picks in the drafts, but they really hit on their later picks, getting Corey Joseph at 29, obviously Kawhi Leonard in that draft at 15, Kyle Anderson at 30 in 2014, great value, DeJounte Murray at 29 in 2016, great value, and Derek White at 29 in 2017, great value. So coming in at number 6, we are going to have the Golden State Warriors. So the Warriors started off the decade pretty rough. They took Ekpe Udoh with the 6th overall pick in 2010 when you had guys like Paul George and Gordon Hayward go after him. And that was fresh off drafting Stephen Curry 7th overall a year prior. But in 2011, they bounced back, taking Klay Thompson 11th overall. And you know how he turned out in the NBA. And that's also a great pick for them too, because going into that draft, some people thought Alec Burks was a lot better, Brandon Knight, Jimmer Fredette, but the Warriors stuck with their gut. They took Klay Thompson, and he ended up being one of the best players of the 2010s. In 2012, they just stayed hot. They took Harrison Barnes 7th overall, really solid pick there, given the players that kind of went after him, that they could have definitely messed up that pick. At 30 though, Festus Ezeli was an important backup big for them throughout their finals runs, or at least to start out the finals runs, I should say, but really wasn't anything crazy for them. He only played in 170 career games and has that infamous pixelated tweet. But at pick 35, They aced this draft, taking Draymond Green, a future defensive player of the year at 35. And drafting Klay Thompson, Harrison Barnes, and Draymond Green in back-to-back drafts was huge and so important for their early finals runs, and then obviously for Draymond and Klay, all their finals runs. In 2015, with the 30th pick, they took Kevon Looney. Great value pick for somebody at 30 there. 2016 at 30, they took Damian Jones. Really hasn't panned out in the NBA. 2018 at pick 28, they took Jacob Evans. Mike Jones really hasn't done much in the NBA. And then Jordan Poole hasn't really done much either. And then they also did get Jordan Bell a couple drafts ago, pretty much buying him from the Bulls, and he actually turned out pretty solid for them. I know that was a little bit backtracking there, but I just wanted to mention Jordan Bell. And then Eric Paschall, though, in 2019 was a really solid pick for the Warriors. He will probably make an all-rookie team. Like the Spurs, like the Heat, the Warriors were good for most of the decade, so they didn't really have a lot of top picks in the draft. They did it in 2010, 2011, and 2012, but pretty much the next 7 years, they didn't whatsoever. But landing on Klay Thompson at pick 11 in 2011, Barnes at 7 in 2012, Draymond Green at 35 in 2012, Kevon Looney at 30 in 2015 definitely warrants them a top 6 spot, and they are coming in at number 6 on this list. Now we are moving into our top 5. So coming in as the 5th spot of the best drafting teams of the 2010s, we have the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers started off the decade just as good as you can ask. They ended up taking arguably the best player from the 2010 class at pick 10, being Paul George out of Fresno State. So taking somebody from not a big school that really didn't dominate college ball whatsoever was a risky pick, and it really panned out for the Pacers. And then at 40, they got Lance Stevenson, who was a big part of their really good teams in the early to mid part of the 2010s. So they started off the 2010s great, but in 2011, what could have been? They ended up trading out of 2 picks in that draft at 15 and 42. Kawhi Leonard was the player they traded out of 15, and Davis Bertans was the player they traded out of 42. So it wasn't as good of a draft for the Pacers as it once was in 2010. In 2012, though, they made a really good value pick at 26, selecting Miles Plumlee, who turned out to be a pretty solid center before kind of getting overpaid in the end of the decade. Like Miles Plumlee, they made another good value pick that ended up getting overpaid at the end of the decade, Solomon Hill, who turned out to be a pretty solid player in his time in Indiana, and then the Pelicans kind of overpaid for him later in the decade. They didn't make a 2014 first round pick, but in 2015 they made a great pick, arguably one of their best picks of the decade, probably their second best pick of the decade, selecting Miles Turner out of Texas with the 11th overall pick in the 2015 draft, which kind of fell off out of the top 4. But the Suns made the right pick in Devin Booker, and then the Pacers taking Miles Turner was absolutely huge for them here with the 11th pick in 2015. They ended up trading their 2016 first-round pick, which ended up being Karis LeVert, for Thaddeus Young. 2017, they drafted TJ Leaf, really hasn't done much in the NBA. In 2018, though, they definitely bounced back and took Aaron Holiday with the 23rd pick, and he's been a pretty solid backup point guard in the NBA so far, and he could definitely be a starter one day. And then in 2019, they took Goga Bitadze with the 18th pick. We really don't know much about him yet, but with Paul George with the 10th pick in 2010, Lance Stevenson with the 40th pick in 2010, Miles Plumlee with the 26th pick in 2012, Solomon Hill with the 23rd pick in 2013, Miles Turner with the 11th pick in 2015, and Aaron Holiday with the 23rd pick in 2018. They are going to come in at number 5 on this list. Coming in as the 4th best drafting team of the 2010s, we are going to have the Los Angeles Lakers. So the Lakers didn't make their first round draft pick till 2014. They had a plethora of second round picks up to that, but really none of them panned out. Guys like Devin Ebanks, Andrew Goodlock, Robert Sacre, Ryan Kelly, none of these guys really panned out in the NBA. They started off the 2014 era, kind of that post-Kobe era that was about to happen, with a bang. With the 7th pick in the 2014 draft, they took Julius Randle, who turned out to be a really good player for the 7th overall pick. Yeah, he got hurt in his rookie year, but he turned out to be a solid player in the NBA. And then they ended up trading cash for their second round pick that went 46 overall in Jordan Clarkson, who turned out to be a great second round pick in that draft. And they were phenomenal in the 2015 draft. They took D'Angelo Russell with the 2nd overall pick, and a lot of people were debating, should they take Jahlil Okafor or D'Angelo Russell with the 2nd pick? And they made the right decision taking D'Lo number 2 overall. And with the 27th pick, they took Larry Nance, who turned out to be a really great player for somebody going 27th overall. And then for the second straight year in 2016, they had the 2nd overall pick, and they took Brandon Ingram, who was a phenomenal player for the 2nd overall pick. Maybe not his time in LA, but he's definitely developed to be a great player in New Orleans, and we're going to give them credit for selecting him number 2 overall. And then in the second round, with the 32nd pick, they took Ivica Zubac, who was a phenomenal second round pick, and has turned out to be a really valuable piece for one of the best teams in the NBA, the Clippers, this year. So great job there by the Lakers. And then for the 3rd straight year in 2017, they had the 2nd overall pick once again. It was definitely the worst out of the three in my opinion, taking Lonzo Ball, but he has not been a bust whatsoever. He's actually developed into be a really solid point guard. He might be an all-star one day. We'll still have to wait and see on that, but good job there nonetheless, and they weren't done in the 2017 draft. They used their pick that they ended up getting in the Brook Lopez D'Angelo Russell trade, that was the salary dump for Timothy Mozgov earlier in the offseason, to select Kyle Kuzma with the 27th pick, and he has been immense value at that selection for the Lakers over the last couple of years, and they still weren't done from that draft. On that draft night, a couple picks later, they ended up trading Tony Bradley, who hasn't really been anything crazy in the NBA so far, for Thomas Bryant and Josh Hart. That is just amazing job by the Lakers on the 2017 draft, ending up with Lonzo Ball, Kyle Kuzma, Thomas Bryant, and Josh Hart. Job well done by the Lakers there. In 2018, they took Mo Wagner with the 25th pick, who has turned out to be a great value pick later in the first round. And with the 47th pick, they took Svi Mikhailiuk, who is great value at 47th. The Lakers did an amazing job post-2014 drafting in the first and in the second round. They really didn't miss on much of their picks, maybe just Anthony Brown, who went 34th in 2015, but that's about it. Moving over to the top three now, coming in as the third best drafting team of the decade, we have the Denver Nuggets. So the Nuggets didn't have any picks in 2010, and in 2011, they made a great value pick. I'm going to keep saying great value picks because if you're getting good rotational players, even starters, out of the lottery, you did your job. And with the 22nd pick in 2011, they took somebody out of Morehead State University in Kenneth Faried. They took the Manimal, and he has been a great player for the Nuggets. Yeah, his time there really didn't end the best, and then his career kind of fell off after his time in Denver, but he did a great job as a Nugget. In 2012, they took Evan Fournier with the 20th pick, another amazing pick at pick 20. Yeah, they ended up trading him for Aaron Aflalo down the line to Orlando, which wasn't a great trade for them, but Fournier has turned out to be a really good player in the NBA, so we're going to give the Nuggets credit there. In 2013, they technically selected Rudy Gobert, and they could have been number one on this list, but they ended up trading him to Utah, and that's not going to be the last good player that they traded to Utah on draft night in the 2010s. In 2014, they had their best draft of the decade, selecting Doug McDermott 11th overall, but realizing Chicago really liked McDermott, so they ended up flipping Doug McDermott for Gary Harris and Yusuf Nurkic on draft night, which is one of the best draft night trades of the decade. And that still wasn't their best move on that draft night. With the 41st pick, probably the best second round draft pick of the 2010s, they selected future All-Star Nikola Jokic with that pick, and that is one of the best draft picks of the decade by far. It's definitely up there in the top three, and it's probably the best second round pick of the decade, so job well done by the Nuggets there. 2015 out, they definitely had their worst draft pick of the decade, selecting Emmanuel Mudiay 7th overall, who did not pan out to be a starting or a top 10 point guard in the NBA whatsoever, but they definitely bounced back in 2016, selecting Jamal Murray 7th overall, Juan Hernangomez 15th overall, and Malik Beasley 19th overall. Jamal Murray is definitely going to be a top 10 point guard one day if you don't think he is already. And Hernangomez and Beasley are good rotational players in the NBA that are definitely going to be playing for the foreseeable future and are always going to have a home in the NBA. But in 2017, they messed up. They technically drafted Donovan Mitchell with the 13th overall pick, but traded him to Utah for Trey Lyles. Yeah, it wasn't a good move whatsoever. And then in 2018, they ended up taking Michael Porter Jr. with the 14th pick, which is still looking like a great pick for them there, but we'll see how his career pans out. But getting guys like Kenneth Faried, 22nd overall, Evan Fournier, 20th overall, trading Doug McDermott for Yusuf Nurkic and Gary Harris, and selecting Nikola Jokic, 41st overall, and getting Jamal Murray, 7th overall, Hernangomez, 15th overall, and Malik Beasley, 19th overall. They had themselves a pretty damn good decade at drafting, and they are coming in at number 3. So coming in into the top 2, we have the Boston Celtics with the number 2 spot. They started off the decade with the 19th overall pick in the 2010 draft, and they did their job there. They took Avery Bradley with that pick, and he has been a great player for somebody going 19th in the draft. 2011, they didn't do much. 2012, though, it wasn't a great draft for them. They ended up taking Jared Sullinger, 21st overall. He didn't really end up doing much in the NBA, and they took Fab Melo, RIP, with the 22nd pick, and he didn't do anything in the NBA. He only played 36 minutes total. 2013, they didn't do much, but in 2014, they did a great job selecting Marcus Smart with the 6th overall pick, and he ended up being a future top 3 perimeter defender for a guard in the NBA. They took James Young, 17th overall. Wasn't a good pick there, so I'm not going to give them credit for that. But in 2015, they did a great job with a non-lottery pick at 16, selecting Terry Rozier out of Louisville. So good job there by Danny Ainge. They did a really solid job selecting Jaylen Brown 3rd overall in 2016. A lot of people thought they were going to take Chris Dunn, so they made a good choice selecting Brown there. Gershon Yabusele at 16, Ante Zizic at 23. Weren't good picks, but still, we're going to give them credit for Jaylen Brown, obviously. And then in 2017, there was a debate who's the best small forward in that draft between Josh Jackson and Jason Tatum, and the Celtics made the right decision selecting Jason Tatum. They also traded down from 1 to 3, knowing they would still get arguably the best player in the draft at 3, and they did. So that was just a phenomenal job by the Celtics front office. In 2018, they took Robert Williams 27th overall. He has kind of been a disappointment in the NBA, but we'll see where his career turns out. And then in 2019, they got Romeo Langford 14th overall, Grant Williams 22nd overall, and Carson Edwards in that draft as well. None of those guys have really been all that good, but we still have to wait and see how their careers turn out. They were only just rookies this past season. But getting Avery Bradley 19th overall in 2010, Marcus Smart 6th overall in 2014, Terry Rozier 16th overall in 2015, Jaylen Brown 3rd overall in 2016, Tatum 3rd overall in 2017. They did a phenomenal job drafting in this past decade, and they are coming in at number 2. And coming in as the best drafting team of the 2010s, we have a non-American team, and that is going to be the Toronto Raptors. So the Raptors started off the decade all right. They took Ed Davis with the 13th overall pick in 2010. He was kind of an underrated player throughout his career. In 2011, though, they had the 5th overall pick, and they took Jonas Valanciunas. Now, if you look at some of the players drafted after Valanciunas, like Kemba Walker, Klay Thompson, Kawhi Leonard, yes, they could have done better, but this was still a really solid pick at number 5. In 2012, they had another top 10 pick once again, and they took Terrence Ross 8th overall. Now, Ross wasn't great value at pick 8, but it still could have been a lot worse, so I'm going to give the Raptors credit there. And they also got Quincy Acey with the 37th pick in 2012. In 2014, they took a meme of a player. He was always 2 years away from being 2 years away when they took Bruno Caboclo with the 20th overall pick. But then this is where things just went amazing for them. In 2015, they took DeLon Wright 20th overall. Amazing value, getting a good point guard at the 20th pick. But they were not done yet in 2015, as they ended up trading Greivis Vasquez, who wasn't a very good point guard at that time. He was definitely winding down his career, for Norman Powell in the 2nd round. So great job getting him in that draft, and a later 2017 first round pick that we'll talk about in a second. In 2016, though, they had just arguably the best draft out of any team. They took Jakob Poeltl 9th overall. Not the best pick there, taking somebody in the top 10, but Poeltl isn't a bad player nonetheless, and he ended up being a pretty solid piece to get Kawhi Leonard a couple years later. But the best pick of that draft, value-wise, at 27, they took Pascal Siakam, who is a top 3 player from that draft class, and they got him at 27. But they were not done yet. Once the draft ended up and concluded, they went to undrafted free agency, and they picked up Fred VanVleet, who was a huge part of their 2019 championship run, and I'm going to count that in the drafting of the decade, because maybe they would have took him in the 2nd round, but they realized he wasn't going to get drafted, so they would end up signing him to a 4-year contract or whatever it was, so he wouldn't be up as a free agent after year 1 or year 2, like most 2nd round picks end up being. In 2017, they ended up taking OG Anunoby, and that was the pick from the Greivis Vasquez trade. They did a great job there, and they didn't have their 2018 first round pick or their 2019 pick, and that was obviously from the Kawhi Leonard trade. But Ed Davis 13th overall in 2010, Jonas Valanciunas 5th overall in 2011, Terrence Ross 8th overall in 2012, DeLon Wright 20th overall in 2015, Jakob Poeltl 9th overall in 2016, Pascal Siakam 27th overall in 2016, Fred VanVleet as an undrafted free agent in 2016, OG Anunoby with the 23rd pick in 2017. They did a great job there. And then I forgot to mention, they ended up signing Terrence Davis as an undrafted free agent in 2019, and he's looking like a great pickup for them so far in his career. So that is going to be for me. I hope you guys did enjoy the video. Let me know what you agree with or disagree with in the comment section below, and was there a team I left out that should have been in here? And if you guys could drop a like on this video, I would really appreciate that. Dropping likes on non-rebuilds always means a lot to me, because I really enjoy doing non-rebuild videos like these top 10s, or looking back as like a best player from every team or something like that. Just NBA style content I really enjoy doing, so dropping a thumbs up means a lot to me, like I said. And yeah, like always, I hope you guys did enjoy the video. Thank you all for watching. Hope you guys did enjoy. I love you guys, and I'll see you guys next video. Peace.